Time changes us all, and part of maturing is being able to look back through a different lens, collectively laughing at our younger selves and the terrible fads and fashions we fell into, while still having an appreciation for the experiences and connections we've learned from and hold a deep nostalgia towards in our hearts. This should obviously come with some self-awareness, the ability to remove personal bias, giving things we had previously written off a second chance to shine. And so with that mindset, I returned to something long abandoned, a game I may have overhyped, leading to unwarranted disappointment in my youth, and I discovered that my younger self may have been right all along, and this is quite possibly the goofiest and most pathetic failure of a horror game ever. Hold your booze until the end. This is Clock Tower 3. It goes without saying that the original Clock Tower is a classic amongst classics, not only predating and establishing its own style before the original Resident Evil, but it is also one of the earliest games you would see receiving a fan translation hack, alongside others yet to receive a Western release at the time, like Final Fantasy V or Seiken Detsu 3. And so for a while, my big plan for Halloween was to cover the history of that entry, alongside the giallo horror works that it took inspiration from, most notably Inferno and Suspiria by Dario Argento. However, I felt something like that deserved a bit more time than I could currently put into it, and so the idea occurred to cover this title instead, split up into chapters the same way I recently did Dark Tales. The problems in that plan didn't occur till halfway through, with the earlier sections of the game being some of the most fun I've had in horror, giving me high hopes that this game would prove worthy to sit alongside the better-loved horror from that time. The level design is linear, but very tight and well laid out, making for a very intense game of cat and mouse, if you play along with it. However, things go quickly off the rails after the defeat of the second boss, Corroder, with the game becoming both too silly to take seriously and too easy for any of the stalkers to be threatening, leading to me becoming a bit of a bully near the end, gleefully spritzing the villains with holy water like a disobedient kitten. If you were to hand this game over to a veteran DVD player, they would think it is a fucking joke. A little history lesson to set the stage. I want you to imagine it's late 2001. Silent Hill 2 is very new and already taking hold as the new standard in horror storytelling. Meanwhile, Resident Evil Remake is on its way to redefine how important visual detail is to the medium. Sunsoft had just acquired the rights to Clock Tower, and planned to put it to good use while the timing was in their favor, going to the big boys of the genre themselves, Capcom, to beg Senpai for a budget. Capcom saw the golden opportunity being handed to them, and so handed Sunsoft the company credit card and told them to go wild. Now we have a good IP and all the quiche we need. The only thing left was to find the perfect director, to put everything together. Enter Kinji Fukasaku, who only 2 years prior had directed Battle Royale, a movie and book I was very much in love with at the time. That being said, it was probably the biggest mistake they could have made. Many people are going to be upset with the idea of coming at an artist's final project from a negative perspective, and it's not something I enjoy as someone who respects their work, but I feel it would be even more insulting to lie about the quality, especially when compared to their true legacy of making memorable films. While he has an amazing catalog of works, his time on Tora 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 possibly being one of the more known contributions in the West, Fukasaku is not someone associated with horror, more so a crime movie director or historical documentarian. He is even less associated with gaming. It's Capcom who came to him. The main reason was mostly name recognition, an attempt to declare that video games were just as legitimate as films, and that this would be the new standard going forward. And it worked, or at least I was sold, and legitimately believed Clock Tower 3 would surpass all other horror games, ignorantly unaware of how bad it would actually be, and how much worse it would look with both Silent Hill 3 and Resident Evil 4 to come soon after. I'm not a fan of beating dead horses, so I'll keep it simple in order for us to move on. Great directors sometimes get handed the wrong projects. Joel Schumacher is very talented at what he knows, but he did not know comics, and so we got Batman and Robin. And similarly, we have an aging film director who makes very serious movies, and so we got this. We open on a lovely mountain view and the exterior of a boarding school attended by our protagonist, Alyssa Hamilton. She has just received a cryptic and unsettling letter from her mother Nancy, warning of her upcoming 15th birthday, advising her to stay in a safe location for the full 24 hours of her quinceañera. Someplace secluded and fortified, with plenty of people around who know her and would check in regularly. But instead of making the correct choice and hiding out at her school, she decides to be a stupid bitch and check in on her mother by returning home, the first place anyone looking to harm her would go. The house itself looks quite large at first glance, with that Raccoon City vibe that's begging for exploration. Sadly, you will be given less area to roam than a small single-family home, despite this being a lodge. Large sections are simply off limits because that is guests only. And there's even an entire wing of the house she will refuse to explore because she is not in the mood, even when we are searching for clues and would want full access. And to add one last bit of bad design on top of that, it is literally the first door you will see when entering her home, the very first place you as the player would be hinted at to check out. Walking into the dining room, we meet the Dark Gentleman, and if this were a real horror villain, we would have lost right here. But instead of overpowering Alyssa while he has the full advantage, and possibly tying her up so that she can't escape until the end of the ceremony, he simply taunts her, hinting that her mother is no more, before getting overly handsy with the teenager, and then walking away to possibly take a nap or some bullshit. I have no idea. Alyssa, on the other hand, wants to find her mother, and so we start searching all 3 available rooms when we come across a weird, ghastly seal locking us out of a hallway. Only a few steps away, the fireplace goes out, and so we crawl inside to explore. Again, this idiot will not search half of her house, but will crawl on her bare hands and knees through soot and leftover burning embers, just in case there might be a hidden path. Inside of the chimney, we find a full-scale marble goddess statue. Pretty normal stuff. And then its eyes begin to bleed for no reason, before its head just decides to pop off. Also perfectly normal and logical. Inside the solid stone angel head, we find a note left to us by our mother. Just go along with it, the entire game is like this. Alongside of that, we obtain the holy water, which is both the saddest weapon ever in a horror game, and also somehow completely overpowered. It will also grant us the ability to break the glowing blue seal on locked doors, allowing us to progress, but not the black seal that is only used once for a few seconds early on, to gate off an optional room with a useless item you already have too many of. There are refill stations very close to every single one of these locked doors, so they will never actually be a hindrance to you for more than the half second it takes for you to splash them. Sneaking into our mother's room so that we may rummage through her underwear drawer in order to borrow her vibrator, we come across a cutscene sitting out on her desk, and decide to chill out on the bed, flicking our bean while ignoring our problems. Suddenly, we are interrupted by a piano solo, which Alyssa immediately links to a ghostly presence, despite there being both a stereo and a PC in the room that could just be playing illegally downloaded MP3s. But, being the genius she is, we are going with ghosts, and so she runs out into the hallway frantically, and back in time to 1948 and the bombing of London. No time to dwell on that first bit of nonsense. We're nearly 10 minutes into this video and just starting level 1, and so we begin exploring, by which I mean following our one and only path until we come across an unskippable cutscene. This is our first victim of the subordinates, a term I will explain better in just a bit, but for now, we've got a ghost problem, and I'm ready to bust. These obstacles are actually the victims of the real villains, and are mostly an optional side quest for extra items. You simply find the object associated with the victim's final moments, usually in the same room as them, and return it in order to send them on their way. Walking around the corner, we notice a large concert hall off in the distance, the source of the music we heard earlier, and so we head straight there, by which I mean the one random storefront we are allowed to enter. I will remind you that this is not Silent Hill, or some abandoned city. We just decided to break in and steal things from a random stranger, for the fun of it. And because we have not triggered the chase enemy yet, we are free to do so with impunity. One of the many game mechanics we will be exploiting to show how broken this game really is. Searching the den, we come across a newspaper article referring to the grisly murder of the young pianist Mae Norton several years earlier in 1942, when abruptly we are startled by a confrontation occurring in the bedroom above. The spirits have returned, reliving the events of that tragic day in gruesome detail. This was probably one of the most brutal and shocking murders depicted in a video game at the time. Not because it's overly gory, but because of how blunt and straightforward the violence is carried out, especially since it involves a 12-year-old child and the game hides nothing. Now the hunt begins, as the bloodthirsty stalker turns his attention towards us, and absolutely nothing will get in the way of his crazed obsession. And so we ignore him, and unlock this drawer so that we can get the key we need to unlock the door upstairs that our enemy just kicked off of the hinges and never closed behind him. I refer to the enemies in this game as stalkers, since they follow that archetype similar to the tyrants you would see in Resident Evil, making Sledgehammer here very similar to Lady D, but with much larger tits. The official term, as mentioned a moment ago, is subordinate. The subordinate acts as a human puppet, a vessel for a non-earthly being known as an entity, used to fulfill its evil desires. You can think of them as a super spoopy spirit that tricks insane people into committing horrible acts of violence, similar to CNN or MSNBC. Giving Sledgehammer the naughty kitten treatment, we loop back to one of the many hiding spots littered around the area. If you play the game right, you'll never need to use the same one twice. We are mostly trying to frustrate the stalker so that he'll leave for a moment, allowing us to quickly do everything needed within the house. Upstairs, we find the concert hall invitation, needed to gain entry to our real destination, when Bitch Tits returns and begins attempting to kick the door in, the very same door he had zero issues busting down just moments ago. Thinking quickly, we grab a chair and chuck it at his skull, only for him to deflect it, and so Alyssa slams into our stalker with her large 90-pound frame, knocking Sledgehammer out cold. And I'm just gonna say it. When your horror game villain gets his shit kicked in by a 14-year-old girl, that's not a good look. Arriving at the concert hall, it welcomes us with open arms, and so we head inside and into the main auditorium where we meet up with the ghost of May, still practicing for her upcoming recital. This will lead into the main loop. Similar to the ghosts from earlier, May needs closure in order to move on, and so we need to help her with this, along with the other victims of the subordinates, up until the game forgets about this plot point roughly 3/4 of the way through. I guess Sledgehammer heard me talking shit, and so he jumps back into the chase, scaring off the ghost of May. This throws us back into our game of hide and seek, as we search around the area for the next necessary item needed to progress. We find a code that unlocks a drawer with a key, that unlocks a box with a lighter, and so on. I'm pretty sure most of you understand that sort of fetch quest these games throw at you, and so we can skip the details. The main point of this section is to light the lanterns high above the stage, so that you can safely travel over to this catwalk for a generic set of wire snips. Snippety snap, we are back, clipping at the wire slack locking us out of this shit shack, and once inside we find another box with a cutscene inside. And again we travel back in time, revisiting the final night May spent with her father before being shipped out to die like a pig on the front lines for the war machine. Admiring his stopwatch, the final memento given to him by her departed mother, she makes a promise to play its song at her recital when he makes it back. Unfortunately, his body would be shredded in a bombing and left to rot, hanging from barbed wire. I'm not just rushing the order of events to keep this video from going on too long. This is actually the attitude I had while playing. Even in mid-chase, the stalker will pause in place whenever you open a door or use items or look at clues, allowing me to just run point to point knocking out tasks, as if there were no actual enemies in the game, just some weird guy trying to follow me around like Tails. And you can tell Konami was watching, making sure this major flaw was not present in Silent Hill 3. And they would also be watching this upcoming boss battle very closely, but I'll save that theory until the end. Up until this point, I was in love with the game my first playthrough, and even on this revisit, the experience had been great so far. Despite the flaws, we have a spooky setting that looked great for the time, a deadly villain who's shown he is willing to hurt us, and a game that's not afraid to get graphic. And so they ruin the immersion, by giving the villain a life bar, before handing you magical girl powers and a cheesy minigame gimmick that has you building meter for super moves. In a fucking horror game. You keep your distance, charge attack when you have an opening, pin the boss down with a few well-placed shots, and then summon Bahamut Zero to finish him off. And you will do the exact same thing with every single boss, with only minor differences in the attacks they can throw at you. Sledgehammer defeated, we return to the auditorium and May to deliver her father's pocket watch along with some terrible news.
Hey girl, your dad's dead. And that sucks. It's truly terrible. I lost my father when I was young too. He didn't die or anything, my mother was a whore, but it's kind of the same. So, here's your stopwatch, and, I'll catch you later.
Fortunately, Daddy arrives before I can scar the young girl anymore. Reuniting with the distraught May and ascending with her towards heaven, the two of them can now be at peace, with Alyssa waving them off before passing out from low blood sugar and cracking her skull on the hardwood floor. Relax, she ain't dead, but this next cutscene might make you cut yourself.
You stupid bitch, you filthy slut! Did you fuck with me?
This Ron Weasley-looking motherfucker is the worst thing in this game, and any goodwill you would have left in you would most likely disappear around this point. This is what happens when a studio has too much money. Instead of just rendering the animation by hand, like an animator would, they decided to throw away their budget on full-body mocap, which was not all that great at the time, as you can see on screen. Solid investment. Why waste money on building areas to explore or adding actual enemies to the game when you can have this? Weasel Ron whips out Big Dick's bedroom key, which he conveniently found outside on the ground. Alyssa could have probably found it herself if she wasn't a stubborn bitch and decided to go outside and look. Handing it over, we leave to explore Dick's, our grandfather's, bedroom, leaving our My Buddy doll to spurg out like an idiot on our bed. Searching Grandpa Cox's room, we find a conveniently bookmarked piece of literature referring to the Rooters. I'll keep this summary short since it's nonsensical. A Rooter is a magical girl whose power awakens around the 15th birthday, allowing her to fight slasher movie villains using Sailor V's love chain, when a gun would get the job done faster. Sadly, Alyssa lives in the UK where you cannot own a gun legally, only machetes. The key point is that this is a girls-only job class, and I want you to remember that, because the game will not. Taking a second look around, we grab a key for the clock in our mother's room, and by using it to solve a puzzle that is ripping off what Silent Hill 2 did a year earlier, we find a magical sigil that can be used to teleport to level 2. So far, we have been transported via haunted hallway, passing out, and now magical symbols, and I really wish the game would just make up its mind about the lore and remain consistent. And now it's 1963 for some reason, and we are surrounded by boxes that seem to be corroded. Hey, that's the name of this stage's boss. Real clever, guys. Having leveled up, we now get 4 spray bottle attacks per refill, meaning this game just got easier, and it will only get more so as we continue to power up and stock up on items we won't even need. Finding an unlocked door, we wander into someone's home uninvited yet again, and here we will run into this chapter's victims. First, Albert Rand, who seems cursed to forever walk in blindness as a ghost, and then we run into his elderly mother, Dorothy, who is blinded as well. And then this happens for no reason. Alyssa survives that second concussion, brushing herself off without even giving a second thought to what just happened. Upstairs we find a small vase and decide to rotate it, for reasons, which opens up a hidden trapdoor underneath this bed. And no, I did not add that Zelda-ass jingle. Climbing down, you exit from a fireplace, and do I really need to explain why this makes no sense? I think we get it by now. After a handful of pointless errands and a redundant info drop, we take the exterior staircase up into Albert's workshop, where he and the ghost of his mother, now not blind, are spending a touching moment together as he presents her with a new old lady's shawl.
That's enough playing happy families. You make me sick.
Without warning, your boy Corroder bursts in, and with Sledgehammer gone, this is the only good villain left in the entire game. Another brutal killer, and another cruel and violent murder. Some consider this to be the more graphic of the two, and only two, victim scenes. In fact, when you look at his acid spray weapon and how it is similar to our own in function, it starts to come off like he may have been meant for later in the game. And given that some of the events feel out of order, along with some more storytelling that we will get into very shortly, I'm of the belief that this was meant to be the third level. We are back in chase mode, so we ignore the villain grabbing ourselves a wrench before climbing through a fan and then going down into the sewer to grab that old blind bitch's blanket. From there, we head back up top to confront Corroder, and no, I did not skip a single thing. Same deal as last time. Keep your distance letting Corroder spray his load till his big round canisters are empty, then pin him in place while he's still in his refractory period, before summoning your favorite Aeon. Returning to give Granny Ghost her blanket back, she is miraculously cured of her undead blindness. And through the power of hugs, her son is cured as well. The afterlife is very confusing. Anyway, they are free from their curse, able to spend eternity at peace with one another, and Alyssa did not take her glucose tablets. And we are back, having used our head injury to teleport home, only to be confronted by the Dark Man, who says some vague bullshit before casting Windaga and sending us into a cutscene. Not only is this FMV sequence unnecessary to the plot, it is yet again another total whiplash moment, making the game even more goofy. Worst of all, this cost a lot of money and time to make, when they should have been building and filling out the world of the game. We have only taken on 2 enemies, in locations much smaller than typical horror games, and we are more than halfway through, with the final location of the game being pathetically small. Like my dick, Alyssa's grandfather, oops, I mean the Dark Man, spoilers, catches her, and now with the young girl in his grasp and at his mercy, he has won. And so, being the villain, he begins his monologue, explaining for the third or fourth time what a rooter is, as if I give a shit, and how he will sacrifice her as soon as the clock strikes midnight, in order to absorb her spirit in order to become an entity, or whatever. He then mocks her by informing Alyssa of her mother's passing at the hands of one of his subordinates, which is weird because subordinates work for entities, the thing he is trying to become. That nonsense aside, he has essentially won. Now having captured Alyssa, he need only wait the hour or so until midnight so that he can sacrifice her. And so he decides to drop her down a hole and into hell. And by hell, I mean a cozy little cave connected to a sewer that looks suspiciously similar to the ones from the last scenario. And we will start to see many more out-of-place assets as we go, building into a theory I'm currently putting together as we progress. A little look behind the curtain. I do not write scripts for these videos, so there's a lot I don't really see until recording the lines and editing in the footage. And as we've been going over the game, I see more and more evidence that this was originally meant to be more like Silent Hill, a somewhat open world that was completely explorable, with every area connected, but in a completely different order, and I am working on that map. Randomly, and with zero fanfare, we are ambushed by the third and least impressive stalker, Chopper. He has no direct victim, although he claims to be a rooter hunter, responsible for defeating all of our ancestors at some point in their life, and I'm not buying it. He's the easiest enemy in the game, and that combined with his lack of a real backstory, along with his level being split among two separate transition areas, is adding to my theory of a last-minute rewrite. We are now being chased through what is basically 3 short hallways linked by an elevator that acts as a safe zone, with the stalker immediately giving up the moment you step inside. We go up and grab some gloves, go down and connect some wires, back up to turn the power on. At some point we hide behind a fish tank which works somehow, and then we exit back into the safety of our home. That's it. If you look around, you'll notice this room shares a similar aesthetic with the home we visited during the last stage. And if you look closer as we head up the stairs, you'll notice some debris that could have come from that bombing we witnessed in level 1, meaning that time travel bullshit was never meant to be in the story. Speaking of time travel, now we're back in the memory of the day Alyssa's father died, and Grandpa Dick is living up to that name, lashing out at his son-in-law for daring to deny him the simple request of allowing him to sacrifice his only daughter on her 15th birthday, removing and devouring her still beating heart so that he can become a ghost demon and send slasher villains after random people, which is a totally reasonable request. Running down the stairs frantically, Alyssa checks in on her father, and it looks like he's gonna have one hell of a splitting headache. Also, Chopper's here. After a little foreplay, we dive face first into a very early boss fight in an area that feels as if it were never meant to be used that way. Not to worry, this is a scripted loss, with Hatchet Man blocking our final attack before deciding not to capture us and instead teleporting us away to a graveyard for some reason. If my conspiracy theories prove true, this graveyard is actually just somewhat off behind the manor, as it is the family's personal crypt. Where else would it be? Detroit? This section is also the shortest, and yet somehow feels like the longest and most boring part. A Zelda puzzle suited for very early on in your quest, not late game. We are here to gain the power of the rooters, which we already have, and so we go off to gather some dinner plates for our strong and independent female ancestors, so that we can send those bitches back to the kitchen. Heading to the opposite side of the plot, we come across a wrecked car belonging to Alyssa's mother, with no one inside. And more theory. Rooters lose their power as they age into early adulthood, so Nancy has no reason whatsoever to visit this tomb. So, we can insinuate that she was heading home on the back road when this accident happened. Suddenly, Chipper returns, claiming that he was the one to take out Nancy, as well as the other rooters in this cemetery, and Alessa does not believe him. It may be an emotional reaction, but I agree with her this time. This guy is lying, and probably has the same body count as a SoundCloud rapper. That is to say, he is a punk-ass bitch. You may have noticed we're almost 30 minutes in and I have not mentioned how you take damage or the panic system, and that's because it just has not come up. But at this point I was so desperate to get to the next level, I just let Chopper get hits in while I solved the last puzzle, cause it didn't matter. Long story short, you do not take damage in this game, you get scared. And if you get too scared too fast, you go into panic mode, which basically sends you off stumbling over your own feet, and getting hit can take you out. That being said, I was already going this way, so I could not care less if Hopper gets a few hits in and sends me into run mode. There is still zero threat. Using the magical dinner plates, we are teleported into a cave with a random oil painting just hanging around, and more exposition we already know. Suddenly, an arrow shoots down from high above us in this cramped underground cave, landing at our feet and granting us the Ancient Arrow, which apparently raises our powers. Power is a relative term, and in a game with no enemies and only 3.5 fights left, it means nothing. It's really just the story telling us we now have permission to fight Chopper, and as mentioned earlier, this was most likely where they planned to have you get your ability to use the arrow in the first place. Exiting the crypt, Chopper is ready to throw down, and so we fucking kill him. I know it sounds like a cop-out, but there's nothing to say about this fight other than keep your distance and attack when you have an opening. There really is very little strategy or skill involved. Returning to the Rooters, we find them gleefully dancing in silence like morons. They collectively thank us for releasing them to move on, before ascending. We are then greeted by the ghost of Alyssa's mother, who follows yet another rule set and is able to fully interact with her daughter. Without warning again, random unexpected shit happens, and the Dark Man reappears to kidnap Nancy, the ghost, threatening to hurt her. Again, she's a ghost. We are then quickly teleported back to the clock tower stairwell, where we meet up with Puppet Mouth before we are again randomly teleported to our backyard. And at this point, I am going to have an aneurysm. The Dark Lord is holding her mom hostage so that she will give herself up, but he's already captured us multiple times and chose to let us go just for fun. And we only learned of Nancy's passing this chapter, but we've been seeing her ghost since stage 2 and not questioning that she may have died. And if the villain wants us to come to him, why did he teleport us away to the backyard after he had teleported us to his domain and could have just kept us there? Exiting down a one-way path under the overpass that makes no logical sense, we are now back on the street, which looks suspiciously similar to the opening scenario that took place in the 1940s. The game is no longer going to use or mention the time travel gimmick, which indicates it was never intended to be in the story. And we are given no time to think about that, barely traveling more than a few feet down the road before we are stopped by a nurse waving out the hospital window. Turns out this is Daniel's sister, a character never mentioned once until this point. And she has just returned from missionary work in Africa, right now, and she didn't bother to go home first, she just went back to the hospital in full uniform, straight from the airport, and then she sat by this window waiting for us to pass by. This makes absolutely no sense, but you know what would? What if, originally when Alyssa found her mother's car, wrecked with no passenger, she took it upon herself to do the common sense thing and check the nearby hospital? And with the map layout suggesting we just exited from the rear of the manor where we found the car in the first place, that is most likely the original planned scenario. Surprise to no one, that isn't his sister, it is in fact our next stalker, Scissor Woman, ironically named after the sex act and not the game's mascot. She's here to dramatically flail around, swinging her weapons near Alyssa with zero intention to actually do anything with them. She is then joined by Scissor Twink, who's doing his best budget Kefka impersonation, while also pantomiming that he totally might hurt you but probably won't. The two of them kidnap Daniel, using him as bait to lure our young hero, when they could have just teamed up and attacked her in the lobby. It's pretty obvious the only reason they added a hospital area to this game and then had the stalker disguise herself as a nurse is because of Silent Hill. And when you look at the concept art for Scissor Man and Scissor Woman, they never share the same theme. In fact, outside of cutscenes, they are never on screen together. In-game, you will never be chased by the two of them at the same time, and you will fight them separately as well. Leading me to believe that Scissor Woman was originally intended to roam this level solo, with Scissor Man being solo in the section to follow. What they do instead is split duty, guarding this one and only hallway making up the level, using a mirror to separate the two. Side A guarded by Scissor Man, and the mirrored hallway being watched over by Scissor Woman, as you track back and forth across the tiny zones, searching for keys to unlock doors that are hiding more keys. Treating the Scissor Twins as if they don't exist, we eventually find a teleport pad that sends us back to our front yard, where we catch a glimpse of Alyssa's grandfather, Penis McBallsack, as he heads towards the front gate as if in a trance. And so we follow, ignoring the enemies yet again before breaking into the main foyer of the building we were just in less than 5 minutes ago. This final area of the game is deceptively small regardless of the wide open entrance and is easily the worst stage in the game, consisting of what is essentially a single long hallway that you waste time going back and forth down and up while collecting items. And with the enemies being zoned to only a handful of rooms, they might as well not even be here. You can quite literally see on screen how useless they are, not even interrupting me as I solve the game's elementary school level puzzles. This is actually around the point where I started playing the villain, with a maxed out water bottle and the refill station being right in the middle of a room you're forced to pass through. I was attacking these guys any chance I got, almost torturing them, just for fun. And you know what? Unscripted? I don't feel bad. They fucking deserve it. The second half of this game has been torture, and I am getting them back for every bit of pain I've been forced to endure. Eventually, we make our way into the study where we find the last book of entities and our grandfather's notes, giving us the final lore dump of the game. Apparently, Alyssa's far-off relative was one Lord Burroughs, who is related to the same family from the original clock tower, although this means absolutely nothing in this context outside of the reference. He too wanted to be an entity, but unfortunately his daughter tragically passed in a carriage accident only several days before he planned to slaughter her and remove her heart. Distraught that he can no longer off his own daughter to become a murder ghost, he started torturing his servants, and then his wife jumped into the gears of the clock tower, so that's why it's haunted, I guess. And he's also a rooter, even though the game previously said that only girls can do that, and I'm not trying to be mean about it, he can identify however he wants. I just don't think evil murder ghosts are gonna make exceptions to their own rules over it. Anyway, it comes down to him possessing your grandfather in order to attempt the ritual again, so that he can become an entity, which is a ghost who controls subordinates, the thing he already is. Randomly, the nearby projector turns on, giving a security cam shot of the twins torturing Dennis. Even more nonsensical than an old-timey projector being hooked up to a modern CCT, the twins, who in lore are from the far-off past, know how a security camera works, and begin jamming their ugly fucking faces up against the screen like 90% of YouTube reviewers. Not wanting to waste time, we take the elevator and run down the final hallway in the game, ready to confront the twins and save our friend.
Welcome, Alyssa. That was just a dress rehearsal. Now let the show begin. Lights, camera, action!
Dennis!
Alyssa!
It was just a prank, bro, and if this game wasn't so terrible, I'd probably laugh. However, double prank, the floor gives out, dropping us down into Alyssa's grandfather's study, where we discover more pointless exposition about the story. What the game really is doing is buying time, by looping us around the same way a platformer would, even showing us repeats of the scenes we just watched moments ago. Well, you know how I feel about wasting time, and so we are back in the torture room where we confront Scissor Girl, who is now all alone for no reason other than the game being unable to handle more than one enemy at a time. This can't even be called a real battle. Scissor Woman's HP is laughably low, and when I decided to try a special arrow out for the first time in the game, I one-shot her. I didn't even mean to do that. Nutshot. Scissorman swoops in, attempting to comfort his dying sister before she explodes into party confetti in his arms. Don't ask. Angered by the loss of his sister/fleshlight, he is ready to take out his revenge, and so we stomp his ass before Dennis impales him on his own trap, like a boss. Good job, fuckface. Knew you had it in ya. One more lore change. Instead of exploding and vanishing back to hell, the twins somehow get to come back as party ghosts, so good for them. Celebrating our victory, Dennis jumps up on the slab and begins showing Alyssa his G-vibe, when without warning, as always, we are magically teleported back to the staircase. There we confront the Dark Man once more, who congratulates Alyssa on defeating his minions before taunting her into coming after him. Or she could just leave. Her hostage mom is a ghost, and he only gets one shot at the ritual. The villain is holding none of the cards, yet making all the demands. Yet for some reason, we head up top to face him. We are at the titular clock tower itself, and I will admit that despite all my negativity, this is a really cool looking area. 10 out of 10. But it would have been a billion times better if there were still enemies left in this game, and there is nothing that can convince me they meant for it to be like this. Up top, we confront the Dark Gentleman, who is also our grandfather and also the pirate Cervantes from Soul Calibur. This choice is beyond infuriating. When looking at the concept art, every idea they put down on paper was more creative and intimidating than what they went with. I get the feeling someone high up saw a few of these and thought, no. These are too good for Clock Tower. Put them in Resident Evil 4 instead. This game gets the scraps. Using the power of bullshit, he strips Alyssa down into a high-cut toga costume before tying her down to a slab and smashing her mother into pieces. Again, all she had to do was leave, and the villain wouldn't be able to do shit. Pope Benedict arrives to begin the ceremony, with all of our ghost pals from earlier showing up to cheer him on like it's Dragon Ball Super. Moments away from receiving the blade, all hope seems lost until our boy, Puppet Mouth, jumps in, tossing Alyssa her Power Stone before attempting to throw Captain Morgan in a headlock. Our magical girl powers fully awakened, we prepare for the final and most challenging confrontation yet, summoning years of experience playing Dark Souls in order to completely beat the piss out of the villain while taking nearly no damage. Again, what do you want me to say? This is by far the least challenging game I have played on this channel, including a fashion gacha, and it isn't even close. Refusing to surrender, we can see the desperate look of insanity in the villain's eyes as he lightly tosses us to the side. With no alternative, we do what must be done, grabbing our mother's head like a football before JoJo posing and summoning the power of our magical necklace in order to grant us a glowing sword that we quickly thrust into Lord Burroughs, killing the ghost and sending him plummeting down towards what I assume is the ground. Evil defeated, Alyssa's mom is healed and restored to ghost form, for reasons, but she still isn't alive, and so the two embrace as the clock tower crumbles around them. Awakened in a random field, Alyssa, now back in uniform, embraces her jest friend Dennis and reflects on what she has just endured, as the darkness slowly evaporates around her. So, that was Clock Tower, and I'm thinking about canceling Halloween early. I really did go into this with the highest of hopes that my original opinion on this game was very, very wrong, only to discover that with a more critical eye, all of the flaws only shone through the brighter. There is nothing but inconsistency, from the tone to the story and even the gameplay flow, to the point that the fan wiki is sarcastically harsh about it. I had no idea that the fan consensus was so negative towards the game, and I thought I'd be setting myself up for crucifixion for daring to criticize something so beloved. But no, even Clock Tower fans know that this game is bullshit. I am still working on that little fan theory on the real Clock Tower 3, being more of a Silent Hill clone, and may even do a separate video on it, but for those of you who stuck around, you can see the basic idea on screen. Opening at the isolated school, Alyssa would naturally take the bus to return home, being dropped off at the bus terminal where the first stage began. From there we would do Sledgehammer's story as is, before unlocking our path home, where we would have our confrontation with the Dark Gentleman. We are then stalked throughout the house, and into the graveyard out back by Chopper. Having found Nancy's car, we then proceed to the hospital where we encounter Scissor Girl on her own, before finding out that the route home is now blocked, forcing us to loop around to the Rand house where we encounter Corroder, before taking the sewer back home, where it transforms into the clock tower and we face off against Scissorman and then Lord Boros. Again, that is just a theory, and I am not doing the line. Anyway, I have prattled on about this dumpster fire for far too long, and it is safe to assume it's going to be a no on the recommendations. I will not stop you from playing this game, nor will I take the blame if you go through with it. But, if you really are that interested, you could always try out Haunting Grounds instead. It's like this game, except the main character is a hot blonde with huge tits, who has a dog she sends to bite people in the face, and also one of the stalkers is a dominatrix in a maid uniform, so better in every way. What game is next? Not a clue, cause this one was painful, but like always I want to thank everyone who got adopts and everyone who is still watching, and I will catch you in the next one.